Okay, underground news, March 18th. In the news the last few days ago was Brexit. Really big hot topic. Now, 5 days ago, Brexit was set to happen. Um, a a no vote withdrawal. Let me first say, Brexit is kind of confusing. It's like seems like the ultimate of uh, bureaucratic ping pong. And for those of you who don't know, Brexit is the term for basically Great Britain's exit out of the European Union. Now, in I believe it was 2002, when the European Union was that date's probably wrong. When the European Union was founded, countries who wanted to join the European Union gave up their currency and got on the euro. What this allowed them was for people to travel from country to country without a passport. It had a unified currency. It made trade easier. It allowed them to manage an area um, more efficiently. Now, Great Britain, however, did not get rid of its currency. So Great Britain uses not only the euro, but it uses the pound. And I believe out of all the countries in the European Union, Great Britain is the only one to keep their currency. Now that's a kind of a devilish move, because what we see happening here is Great Britain wanting to leave the European Union. And they have their own currency to put their weight on when they do. And there was a vote recently, and this vote was, I believe it was for an extension. Anyways, it was the second time that they voted on it. And it was originally scheduled to have a March 29th withdrawal in April 15th. Excuse me. In April 15th. They would have had to pay $7 billion to the European Union. They're negotiating whether or not there's going to be a soft exit or a hard exit, where they just dump the euro altogether, or do they do it in phases? Is it going to take years? Is it going to take this? From what I've heard in the news, there's an extension going until May, sometime in May. Now Brexit is getting kicked, the can is getting kicked down the road until May. This will have huge repercussions for the entire world. The world is already experiencing a global economic slowdown. Brexit leaving is just one more piece out of the Jenga puzzle. And that's just about it. Like I said, it's the pinnacle of bureaucratic ping pong. But as this title says, one way or another, they will get their Brexit. It's part of the plan. Great Britain does not want to be in a sinking ship, so they're going to leave the sinking ship, and when they leave the sinking ship, it's going to cause the ship to sink even faster. Who gives anything of what this guy says? He's part of the problem too. So, Brexit referendum rejection. Now, what this means is there's a no deal withdrawal. So if they cannot come up with a deal, then it's probably going to end up being a hard withdrawal, and the world is going to see the repercussions very quickly, because the European Union knows that when Great Britain leaves, it's going to hurt the European Union. So Great Britain is trying to get their hands on every last dollar that they can, every last trading position that they can get, every last ounce of advantage in Brexit that they can get, and it might be to their detriment. Moving over the pond to the United States, just recently with the massive flooding that has been occurring in the Midwest. There's a Nebraska nuclear plant, which here it says full power as floodwaters recede. However, a couple days ago, there was some anxiety. There was some worrying about what could potentially happen, um, because the Cooper Nuclear Power Station, um, it was at risk of becoming inundated by seasonal floods. And um, if you're not a nuclear power expert, basically what happens is, um, if they are using uranium fuel, there are uranium. It's an element. It's a radioactive element. Um, in specified amounts, they put the element close to each other, and it causes um, gamma radiation, which manifests itself as heat. And this heat evaporates water, and it causes turbines to spin, and that's how electricity is generated. Now, in the Chernobyl disaster, the water that is used to cool the water that is used to cool the uranium rods to prevent a full-scale meltdown evaporated, and what happened was the entire space was saturated with hydrogen molecules, and that created a hydrogen bomb. When it got too hot, it ignited, and it shatters the uranium rods, and it sends particles flying everywhere. That's what happened. Now, moving over to Fukushima, which happened in 2011, from what you can see on the video in 2011, there was a hydrogen explosion. The media is going radio silent per orders of the government. We do not know what is going on. There's only little bits of information. Still to this day, it is not. The situation is not resolved. Now, one of the biggest problems with the Fukushima Daiichi plant is something called liquefaction. Okay? Now, what liquefaction is when the ground becomes saturated with water, and it basically becomes mud. So on a small scale, if you're ever walking through a field or the woods and you step in what looks like grass, but it's really squishy and sumptuous, and your foot sinks in, that's basically what liquefaction is. And on a larger scale, if we're talking about liquefaction, you'll see something to the effect of sinkholes. And we're talking about nuclear power plants here just totally becoming compromised, and it's very dangerous. You can look into, I believe it's the Columbia River in Washington is the most radioactive river in the world, because the storage techniques at the Hanford plant are insufficient, and when they buried the spent fuel, it began to leak into the river, and it has not been fixed. And here we go. Here's the explosion. You'll see a full-on hydrogen explosion, not a meltdown. It's in slow-mo. It's a whole lot easier to see in fast motion. That's a hydrogen explosion. That's not a diesel generator blowing up. That's a hydrogen explosion. Okay? And this power plant in Nebraska was at risk for flooding. Which also brings me to our topic. Not only does flooding compromise these nuclear power plants, but freezing water can compromise the nuclear power plants. If the water going into the cooling stations is frozen, if the grates are frozen, like which happened during the cold spell in the Northeast about a month ago, I forget when it was. Let's see when this article is dated. January 31st. If the water going into the nuclear power plant is frozen, they have to shut down the nuclear power plants. And we start talking about a dangerous, a red zone, a dangerous area where are they getting the water from? And they're not generating power. You know, you start talking about the water has to come in from somewhere, so they might have had to grab a fire truck and start pumping water in from a fire hydrant. I don't know exactly what they did here. They didn't have to do anything like that here. So, see, there was slushy ice blocking 70-foot filter screens. And those filter screens got clogged, and there was no water moving into the plant. Now, everything is okay now, and in stable times they were able to devote resources to solving this problem. But if the resources are spread too thin and they don't, what happens? We'll see a meltdown, and then there's all types of problems that go along with a meltdown and a resulting hydrogen explosion. The entire area will be not safe to live, even though the government will tell you that it is safe to live. And this is the cause of most cancer. Most cancer is caused by nuclear power plants. Every time they burp or hiccup, they release radioactive iodine, amongst many other things. And they're not going to tell you when they mess up. They're not going to tell you that. And here's a map of the nuclear power plants in North America. Okay. Just so you get an idea. Look at the eastern half of the United States. Here's a topographical map. We're going to look at that just so I can show you. Now, most of the water in North America comes from the Great Lakes in this area right here. And it flows south. And it flows south. And there's some water right here that flows north to the Atlantic. All this water is flowing this way. Okay? Yeah, there might be some springs along the Appalachian Range that are minor tributaries of some of these rivers. But there's no snow-capped mountains in this area like there is in the Colorado Rockies, or just the Rockies in general. There is not any snow-capped mountains like they have here. Okay? And there's even nuclear power plants on Canada's side, along the Great Lakes. And I'll explain what the grand solar minimum is in a minute. But as we move into the grand solar minimum, I'm not a huge fan of nuclear power. Just so we can charge 5 cell phones and 5 TVs and 5 computers per household. And you know, as people, we should be putting the phones down, going outside, talking to people face to face, but we don't do that. We don't do that. It's way different from when I was young and we started using what was it? American Online Instant Messenger. Some people remember AIM with screen names and whatnot. That was, I believe we don't need anything beyond that. The social media, this, that, and the third. You go out and you see people sitting around and looking at their cell phones. It's ridiculous. And they say we need all this nuclear power, all these nuclear power plants. For what? For what? This is a bigger risk than nuclear bombs, than nuclear warheads. Okay, I tell people this all the time. You should find solace in the fact, you should find comfort in the fact that almost every single country in the world is run by the Masons. You should feel comfortable that Trump, that Xi Jinping, and Putin are all Masons, and they gather together and they wear the robes and they go through the rituals and they're friends and they pop champagne together. You should be comforted by that. You know why? Because there will not be any mutually assured destruction. There will not be a nuclear exchange that sends the world into a nuclear holocaust, a nuclear winter. It won't happen because they need this planet to be healthy in order to live. They can't, if they could create a nuclear winter that lasted for, say, 2, maybe 3 years, they would. They'd do something like that. They'd go into their bunkers. They have all the food because we grew it for them, and we paid their taxes to their programs to build all the underground bunkers. And they would, but it doesn't work like that. A nuclear winter would last forever, and it would be impossible to resuscitate the ecosystem, the global ecosystem. One thing that they are doing, however, is moving to the southern hemisphere. Okay, I've heard that New Zealand is a very New Zealand is a favorite area of the elites because it's so far out of everything. I believe that's New Zealand. I'm feeling very geographically illiterate right now. I know where New Zealand is. I'm just drawing a blank. But you can see. Look at Europe, even Asia right over here. Now the southern hemisphere. This is the equator. No, excuse me. Like I said, the equator is right about here. Here, I think. Okay. And the way that the jet streams operate, they run in cycles, cyclical fashion, circular fashion. It somewhat isolates the pollution and the radioactivity, and it creates a barrier because if it were to rotate like this, the other side rotates against it, so the two currents will go against each other, and it creates a barrier along this area, preventing most of the radiation from entering South America, South Africa, Australia, and New Zealand. And this whole area would be safe if something bad were to happen to these nuclear power plants. Now, luckily, the people who run the nuclear power plants are most likely not part of the global cabal, and they don't want to see, even then, they don't want to see all these nuclear power plants melting down. That would be worse than all the nuclear bombs detonating. Don't quote me on that, but these power plants are way worse. If Iran was such a problem, if they really, really wanted Iran, all they would have to do is allow them to build nuclear power plants and then just blow them up. That's all they would have to do. It would poison the water of the people forever. Forever. There's the iron, not the Iron Dome. And I'm going off on a tangent. There's an area where all the nuclear missiles were tested by the Soviet Union in Kazakhstan, and it is terrible. Vice News did a half an hour long video on, it was the Iron Dome, the Iron Circle, I forget what it was called. It's terrible. The genetic, what they're saying is the people who live there were poisoned by nuclear radiation so bad that they should have a genetic passport that they carry with them everywhere, basically to prevent them from going to another country and carrying their genetics somewhere else, because the chances of them having a severely deformed offspring are too great to allow their genetics to mix with the rest of the world. It's that bad. And what this pertains to is the grand solar minimum. Now, um, trigger alert, global warming caused by um, carbon dioxide is, and excuse my French, but bullshit. And the reason I'm saying that is because the methane, which is released from all of the feces of all of the cows that we domesticated on planet Earth, is way worse than all of the carbon dioxide. Something like, I don't know, don't quote me on this one either, anywhere from 15 to 30 times. I've heard many sources. I didn't take the time to verify it, but it's anywhere from 15 to 30 times more detrimental to the ozone when it gets into the atmosphere. And even then, that's not the main cause. That's not the leading cause. The cause is the sun. It's called the grand solar minimum. Okay? I have these out of order. Now, what we're looking at is the sunspots. Now, what a sunspot is, a coronal mass ejection in a sunspot. If you go to Suspicious Observers, that's a site that studies sun science. They've done tremendously, I don't know, you people go crazy over double-blind, placebo, peer-reviewed, whatever's. They've done so many of them regarding the ability to predict when and where earthquakes will happen based upon the what would be considered the geomagnetic locations of these sunspots on the sun. It mirrors. So depending on where a sunspot is and the strength of a sunspot, when it faces Earth, they can predict where the earthquakes will happen on planet Earth. This is, yes, there are scientists who have figured this out to above 90% proficiency, and the world powers don't want to put it into practice because then we would learn that the carbon taxes that they're pushing for, and I haven't read a single thing about it, but the Green New Deal, the New Green Deal, whatever they want to do to increase taxes about environment, it's a lie. It's a scam. 100%. Now, a sunspot is a measurement of the sun's activity, not the temperature, but the sun's activity, and it creates what's called coronal mass ejections. Okay, and if you believe NASA, if we believe what they're showing, okay, a coronal mass ejection, now the sun would be here, but they block it out. It looks like this right here, coronal mass ejection. It's when energy in the sun builds up, and literally, just like lightning, energy jumps from here to here, and it, boom, it explodes, okay? It explodes. And this was, you know, the Mayan sunstone. They talk about the end of the world would have happened on December 21st, 2012, and I kind of bought into maybe the world wouldn't end, but there was something surrounding it, and maybe this is what they were talking about. As you can see, these are solar filaments. I don't see a full-on... Here we go. This would be a coronal mass ejection. This happens very frequently. And what this does is it feeds energy into the Earth, okay? Okay. The best way I can describe the Earth's magnetic field is a donut. It's a donut that surrounds the world. And when these coronal mass ejections shot out to planet Earth, these circles absorb the energy and they feed it down into the core of the planet Earth, and this is what propels the spin and the energy of the heat. One of the things that propel the Earth. Everything is a celestial symphony, and everything is working at such precision. Okay. Now, the time period that we are entering, this grand solar minimum, is a period of less solar activity, as was seen during here, the mini ice age. And you can go here and you can Google. Okay, little ice age. Right here. This actual information. And I don't really like Wikipedia. I heard something the other day. Two-thirds of all Wikipedia articles were written by one person. It could be wrong, but you never know. It's a good reference point, but nothing is better than books. Nothing is better than even then. Some scientific journals, they can be BS. They can be fraudulent. This is the little ice age right here, and I highly recommend everybody checks out this guy's channel. His name is David Dubine, Adapt 2030. He covers the grand solar minimum better than anybody that I've been able to find. And one thing that he has, I don't know if he's the one who did it. He spent a lot of time in Asia. But one thing that he figured out is every time there's a solar minimum, Asian dynasties fail. Yep, here we go. I'm not going to really go into this too much, but this is kind of like what they do. They show medieval periods, Roman periods, Minoan periods, all this, that, and the third, and they show the sunspot activity. And they go back and they record it because they can pull ice core data, and they can figure stuff out like that. And he has literally, it's like a superimposed image, and they have figured out dynasties fail, volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, it's all tied into the sun, okay? Now, what we're experiencing right here is a separation of the seasons, okay? And it's just beginning to become extreme. Okay, this is what this climate change and all this crazy weather is from. It's from the sun, and the sun is changing. I don't know if you can see this here, but we got the red and the blue flipping all the way out to 2035, 2050. Sometime around there is when it's gonna even I don't know. This is just a guess. We don't know what's gonna happen. Okay, but all the way out, way into the future, things are going to be crazy. And these are the cycle 24, solar cycle 24, solar cycle 25, solar cycle 26. Unfortunately, universities and governmental agencies, they'd rather send people, they'd rather spend trillions of dollars creating an illusion that we're sending people into space. Do they send a drone out into space from time to time? Yes. Did they send a drone to Mars recently and take pictures? I don't know. Who's ever seen Mars? Who can verify that that is in fact Mars? Nobody can. And that's the ultimate skeptic's response, but you have to be skeptical with something like that. People are skeptical with a $50 oil change, buying electronics off somebody on a corner street in New York City, and we're not skeptical of $1 trillion projects. Like, where's all the money going? You can blame whatever you want for the world's ills, but seriously, they're not doing what they say they're doing. They're not doing what they should be doing. This is happening, and it's getting worse. This is what's causing the seasons to flip on themselves. And there was a person by the name of, I'm going to spell this wrong, terribly wrong. Okay, there's a Hopi, Akima Honyomtewa. Okay, now, Akima, for fun, he's an artist. You can check out some of his art. Okay. For those of you who are interested, Akima here has his own YouTube channel, which you can check out. And he shows, there's a video of him building creating buildings Hopi style. You can watch Akima and the way that they grow corn, which is totally out of this world. They grow this Hopi blue corn. It's amazing. Here, check this out. That's not how we grow corn. They've been growing corn. They say that the Spanish brought corn over. The Native Americans have been growing something, corn's relative, for the longest time, which is called teosinte. And it's important to understand stuff like this coming into the grand solar minimum, because it's these old crops which are going to be the saving grace of humanity. These new crops like corn, they're domesticated, they're losing their nutritional value, this, that, and the third. Teosinte. It's like corn, but it's not like corn, as you can see. And the Hopi have been growing. That is how long the Hopi have been doing what they've been doing. That's how long this tradition right here lasts. Okay. Now back to Hakima. Now this guy right here, RD47 blog, he knows Akima. And he visits Akima from time to time. I believe it's been a while since he visited Akima. This is all of his videos. But you can go down to Hopi Akima story, which would be, I think it was 3 years ago, 4 years ago that he did it. He does tons of work out west, visits them every time, whenever he gets a chance. Alright, here you go. Hopi Akima's message to the world. This is the video you want to watch. Now in this video, if you watch some of Akima's videos, he drives a truck and he listens to music. He listens to hip-hop music. So he's not a complete Luddite, okay? A Luddite is people from Great Britain who resisted technological advancements, so they snuck into warehouses and they went and they destroyed everything to try and sabotage industrialization. It didn't work, obviously. But he's not a complete Luddite, but he likes to practice old methods. And in this video, he tells the entire Hopi perspective on what the world is going through. And I'm not sure, there's 3 videos. Okay, I'm not sure which video it was, part 1, part 2, part 3. He talks about the seasons flipping on each other, and he also spoke that the way that they grow and the way that they plant is by the moon, and they look for the insects, and that's how they can tell what time it is. Without a calendar, they can go through the stages without keeping track of time. They listen to nature very, very keenly, and he says that everything is off. He says the moons are off, the bugs are off, the seasons are off, everything is off, and it's just the beginning. He said the seasons will flip, and he says there will even be a year, 2 years, 3 years without summer. No summer whatsoever. Everything will be... And that's what the grand solar minimum is. That's what this whole time period, maybe this is the time where the seasons get confused. But it's going to get worse going into 2020, 2021. This is going to cause massive crop failure. Too hot, the crops fail. Too cold, the crops fail. If the winters, if the planting seasons and harvesting seasons are too wet, the crops rot. The protein content on wheat is lowering. The stock markets are going to go haywire with the futures. It's inevitable. Even if there wasn't a global conspiracy, even if there wasn't economic failure, food is going to become scarce. The potato famine is going to look like it's inevitable, and people need to prepare for it. I'm gonna be okay. I know which trees to go around and peel the bark off of and look for the cambium layer and peel that off the tree and eat that. I bet you didn't know you can eat trees. I bet you didn't know that. I know that. I know not to eat grasshoppers because of the parasites that they have, even if you cook them. People are going to resort to cannibalism. Cannibalism 100 years ago is going to be different from the cannibalism today, because human beings are dirty, and I guarantee that they have more prions in them than previous than if you look at the cannibals that are existing, like in that island in the Maldives, where recently a tourist was cannibalized. And even then, those people are nuts, because that's what it does. It causes people to go crazy. The prions cause something similar to Alzheimer's, but it causes aggression and delirium. And when things go crazy, you kill your neighbor, you eat your neighbor. You start to go crazy, you're gonna end up killing your family and eating your family. And that's what the world's gonna, if it gets that far, it's gonna happen. Okay, in Venezuela, um, be, mostly due in part to sanctions and the world not wanting to be labeled a terrorist for trading with them. People, they broke into the zoo and they started eating the zoo animals. People started eating their pets because of food scarcity. And the grand solar minimum hasn't even begun yet. Can't stop the sun from shining. Or not shining. In the movie The Book of Eli with Denzel Washington, towards the end of the movie, he and um, another character, they were running from the antagonist, and they sought refuge in the house of an elderly couple who lived out in the desert. And one of the parts of that scene which I remember is Denzel Washington said to his companion, "Did you notice their hands? Their hands were shaking, and they had offered what they said was coyote meat." He said, "Don't eat the food. It's human meat." They went outside and they saw all the graveyards, all the graves of people. They saw, like, you know, the people that they shot, they killed, they ate, and it caused their hands to shake. And I know it's just a movie, but that's pretty much what happens if you look at the symptoms of cannibalism. Right here. And that's due to prion. And Kuru is a disease caused by prions. You see? And this is what's going to happen. People are going to go crazy. It's literally The Walking Dead. Quite literally. And moving on to more cinematography, we have winter is coming in the Game of Thrones, and this is the final season. Right before the Grand Solar Minimum. Right before governments start to fail and shut down. George R.R. Martin knows things. A lot of people, just like Carlton Cuse, who wrote The Strain, and he wrote Colony. I don't know what he's writing about in his latest. It's a horror flick, but it's not my flavor, not my style. I don't watch it. But he wrote. People get insider information just from connections, word of mouth. People like to talk. People like to gossip to feel special. And these writers, they figure stuff out. Just like J.R. Tolkien, when he wrote The Lord of the Rings, it was an allegory. Okay. It was an allegory, a story, a poem, a hidden meaning, typically moral, political one. Just like these ones right here. Animal Farm, Lord of the Flies. Okay? It's an allegory. The Lord of the Rings is an allegory. The Game of Thrones is an allegory. And winter is coming. Okay? Winter is coming. The information's out there. You just have to take the time to do it. moving on. Earlier last year, about a year ago, coming out of Israel, there was what's called the Trump Temple coin. Now they minted a half shekel with a picture of Trump and a picture of Cyrus. Now this was on the heels of Trump declaring uh, uh, Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, or moving the embassy to Jerusalem, or something like that. Um, this was actually minted. Like, this is, I believe it's silver. I don't know what they made it out of. But I believe it was silver. And they're saying that it has biblical inspiration, biblical sources. Okay. And who is Cyrus? Cyrus the Great is a character in the Bible, and they believe that he was also a character in real life. But in the first year of his reign, he was prompted by God to decree that the temple in Jerusalem should be rebuilt. I mean, really? Remember, I spoke about the third temple, and I said there's a lot of stuff out there, and I spent 50 minutes on the first time I spoke about it. And when they get their third temple, well, they're going to rebuild it. They're going to rebuild it. And I don't know if you people remember, but 9/11, when people fold the dollar, we found this. Take it for what you want. I mean, it was an inside job. If you're unable to come to grips with the fact that this was an inside job, then just turn this off right now, because, unsubscribe. All of my 114 subscribers. Don't listen to this. But it was an inside job. We're being lied to and deceived on a grand scale. And they started a war. And they killed many, many people on both sides of the aisle over lies. Right here we have the new 100 shekel. I forget how old it is. 2 years. Less than 2 years. The new paper 100 shekel. Now, keep in mind that we really don't know much about much. We only know what we think we know. Okay? But applying the same principles here, with hidden images in the dollars, there were some people who discovered that if you take this side of the dollar bill, of their shekel, and you put two of them next to each other, you combine this image right here and this image right here. Look. See? This image right here and this image right here. Look. This image right here. This image right here. And this is what it forms. Some type of person, some type of whatever. Is it the Antichrist? Is it the Messiah? Is it Jesus? Is it Harry Potter? Who knows? Maybe it's the spaghetti meatball monster. Yeah. Maybe it's the spaghetti and meatball monster. So, reason I'm bringing this up, now I don't put too much Purim is a holiday for March 21st, I believe. It's the 18th right now. Rabbi says the Messiah is here. Is it Trump? Is it Jared Kushner, who owns 666, who owns the address 666 on 5th Avenue? Is it Mohammed bin Salman? Is it Lord Voldemort? Who knows? But if you listen to my last previous episodes, I explained to you everything that's going on. Okay? Some of what's going on. There's so much I can't possibly do it in one episode. When the episode is up, I'll put a whole bunch of links in the description. And yeah, I mean, I spoke about in the Bible it says Damascus will be destroyed in a day. Well, just a clarification, Damascus in biblical times was at one point in time was the capital of the Persian Empire. Pretty sure. I hope I don't want to get this wrong, because then I got to do another video. However, when it says that Damascus will be destroyed in a day, they might not necessarily be referring to Syria, the physical Damascus of today. They might be referring to the remaining Persian Empire, which is this country right here. And so, if you wonder why this country right here is always drowning in tension, it's literally because two of the other largest religious denominations in the world, in their eschatology, calls for the destruction of their entire country in a day. In a day. And so yeah, you're gonna find extremists with nothing to lose killing Christians and Jews all day, every day. You're gonna find that. And then you get illiterate people, and I stress illiterate, because most Americans, even though they can sound out the words, sound out the letters, even though they can do that, even though they can sound out the letters, they don't know what they're reading. Okay? So, as we see with, now, I'm hearing all types of stuff about New Zealand being a false flag. I'm not going to get into it. I don't get into it anymore. I've seen my fair share of false flags. I can't afford to obsess over it. But if you've never, right here, New Zealand's shooter was a Mossad agent. Mossad is the CIA of Israel. Okay, now is it true? I don't know, but they find these things. The people who obsess over it, they find the truth. The truth will not be withheld from people who care enough about it. These people are sloppy. They can't contain the truth. They just can't. There's some things that they probably have done that the truth will never find the light of day, but if they do it enough times, somebody will mess up. Somebody will figure it out. I've seen my fair share of false flags. I know how they work. And we get, let's just suppose that this was an organic attack on Muslims. Let's kill Muslims because they want to kill America. No, you dummies. Yes, but no. I mean, Anyways, I'm ranting. I'll end it. I'll end it now. Brexit, Fukushima, nuclear power plants, grand solar minimum, the seasons flipping on each other, right on the heels of false flags and temples being built. We got solar storms, collapses of countries. But hey, the Hopi have been here for time immemorial and even beyond that. And Akima's happy. He's worried, he's concerned, but he's a happy camper, so to speak. Okay? And you know, I mean, pretty much just what it is. This is all by design. There's no this isn't happening just because of chance. This is all happening by design. Let's see. See if I got a listener. Let's see. See. See if they'll pop into the chat menu. See if I can take some requests. Oh, there it goes. Goodbye. Goodbye, listeners. Anyways, maybe one day. I don't monetize this. I don't do this for money. I'll be okay. Like I said, I know that I can eat trees. I believe it was the Shoshone. Was it the Shoshone or the Blackfeet? Give me a second. Yeah, it might have been the Shoshone, which were regarded as the one of the poorest Eastern Shoshone would be regarded as one of the poorest Native American tribes on the continent. They survived. See, on all sides they were oppressed by absolute they were oppressed by some of the greatest warrior tribes around, okay? And so they were up in the hills of the Rockies, way up there. And they survived the winters by digging up spruce roots and eating the roots and living on dried salmon and spruce roots. That was their diet, and they were able to do so. So there's lots and lots of good information out there regarding the Native Americans, and they didn't have technology. But that's it. Underground news, 50 minutes. I knew it was going to be a long one. Didn't know it was going to be an hour long. Let's see. I got another listener. See if we get some chat. I really want to get some people asking questions, because sometimes when I rant, I just rant and I try and get myself back on topic, but nothing. Alright, I'll shut it down.